welcome to our talk, Bad Randomness, Protecting Against Cryptography, Perfect Crime. My name is Tal Berry. I'm the CTO and co-founder for Zengo. In Zengo, we make a very secure cryptocurrency wallet powered by MPC technology. We will touch it a little bit in the solution part of this talk. And I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time in Black Hat Asia. Really wonderful event, but 9 times in all other Black Hat events. So let's see. So first of all, I feel obliged to tell you there will be no AI in this talk, no machine learning, no LLMs. So yeah, I see a couple of people leaving the room, but some are entering. So thank you for coming, all the boomers. No AI, I'm a boomer myself, so no shame in it. Also, no Greek letter were harmed in making this talk. So there will not be, although we're talking cryptography, and I think we are maybe the only talk in the cryptography track, there will be no formulas. We'll try to explain everything with load-bearing analogies. Okay, so after we talk about what will not be in this talk, let's talk about what actually is going to be in this talk. So we'll start by explaining why we claim that bad randomness is cryptography a perfect crime. And then we'll move on to some true crimes and see how at least three examples for in the wild exploitation of these high-profile vulnerabilities in multiple fields, including cryptocurrency, authentication, and internet security with TLS. And we will not leave you just with the problems. We'll also suggest some practical solutions to that. So let's start with the perfect crime. What would make a crime a perfect crime? So first of all, it needs to be lethal. It's not just shoplifting. You have to do something really, really bad for it to be a perfect crime. But this is, you know, you can go to any other talks here. We're all talking about vulnerabilities, they take over computers, and so on and so forth. So everything is lethal. But the most interesting point is the second point. We want to do it in an undetectable manner. This is the important. That's what makes a crime a perfect crime. And we claim that bad randomness is indeed a perfect crime. So why is randomness is lethal? Because randomness is vital. This is a quote from Professor Dodis. Randomness cryptography is like the air we breathe. You cannot do anything without it. So we can conclude that positively, randomness is vital. But the converse also holds, like the lack of randomness is indeed very, very bad for the health of the system. And this is because of Kerckhoffs' principle. The security of a cryptographic system only depends on the security of its private key. And so therefore, keys should be kept secret and be unguessable. You all know that. But what is the best way to make something unguessable? Making it so hard that even yourself, you cannot guess it. And the way to do it is by injecting randomness into the process. So even I don't know and cannot recreate that key unless I store it. So it makes it unguessable. But the use of randomness is not limited just to keys, but also other crypto parameters, such as nonces, initialization vectors, IVs, and so on and so forth. And when these values that are supposed to be random, if they are not random, then in most cases, it totally breaks the whole cryptographic system. So we had established that bad randomness is a very critical and a big crime, yeah? But is it undetectable? And the answer, yes, very much, because this is a famous Dilbert cartoon, and the random number generator says all the time 999, and they say, is it really random? We say, okay, we cannot really tell. And this is, of course, takes it to extreme, but the real problem is that there is no such thing as random number. Okay, it's colloquialism. Like, it actually means these are numbers that were created by a random process. And so this is actually, randomness is the quality of the process, not of the number. So when you get or your system gets a number, supposedly from the random number generator, it has no way to make sure it's actually random, right? Because the number in itself is not random. The process that created it was random. But of course, you cannot tell if a number is random or not. Just the process can be random or not, but you have no evidence for that. And it's not only, maybe you're saying, okay, I cannot tell for one number, but if it's 9 all the time, then probably it's something wrong there. So I can look at the series and do something about it. But the problem, and maybe I cannot do it in real time, but I can collect forensic evidence post-mortem and analyze it. And this is really interesting. You will not have such evidences because this evidence is not collected by design, because if we collect the outputs of a random number generator that is used for keys, that is used for cryptographic elements, we create a new vulnerability, right? Because attackers can take it and use it. So this is a perfect crime. Not only we don't have the evidence, we are forbidden from collecting such evidence. So indeed, you can create bad randomness as an attacker, and no one will know. So it's lethal, it's undetectable. So let's start with first in the wild story of bad randomness. So this is our first season, and in which we will attack Bitcoin addresses with bad randomness and see how it's actually exploited in the wild. This is important. It's not just a vulnerability, it's actually exploited in the wild, all of these examples. So let's remind ourselves how Bitcoin addresses are born. It all starts with a random 128-bit number. You add some checksum to it, and assign to each group of 11 bits, you assign a word from a dictionary, from BIP39 dictionary, to get the notorious, infamous seed phrase, so you can back up that, private key. And then you apply some key derivation function to it, 2,000 rows of HMAC SHA. And finally, in order to have multiple addresses created from one single secret, you apply some hierarchical deterministic derivation out of it. But these are all details. What's important to note is that it all starts with a random number. And all the security of your Bitcoin, your private key controls everything. If you have it, you have everything. If you don't have it, you have nothing. So all control is concentrated in this random number. But if it's not really random, then someone else can guess it and can break the whole system. So we wanted, before that, so this has actually happened. This is a report from a few months ago from the Washington Post. It says if you create a Bitcoin wallet before 2016, your money might be at risk because, long story short, because it was created with some bad randomness. It was JavaScript random number generator, which is not as random as we want to have, and doesn't have enough entropy. And also, since this is created private key, and in Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, your private key determines your address. It's not just something disposable. You keep reusing it. So even if you change wallets at the time and you just move your fund by, again, using the seed phrase to recreate your addresses from backup, you are carrying that vulnerability with you over the years. So although you're not using the original wallet that introduced that vulnerability, you are still vulnerable to it. And there was quite a few incidents that people lost their money, but again, bad randomness is stealthy. You don't know if the problem was bad randomness, or maybe they were negligent about keeping the seed phrase. Maybe they had a malware on their computer. So again, you see, bad randomness is very, very stealthy attack. It's very hard to prove it. So we wanted to create such thing that will prove that there are people out there, there are bots out there that are really looking for it, actively looking for it. So we thought, okay, let's create such vulnerable address. Let's start with an entropy. Instead of randomizing, well, let's start with the number 1, which quite appropriately creates the following seed phrase of abandon, 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 which is quite prophetic, but also because the BIP39 dictionary is lexicographically sorted, so the first word starts with AB, so it's abandoned, but it's quite nice. Okay, and we made sure this address is pristine. No one used that in the past, so no one should have the private key of it. There is no evidence that someone had the key on it. And then we wanted to send money to it, and as we send money, you can see the time here is 9:51. Then immediately, the same split second, this money was transferred from that address resulting from the private key, which was not random, and immediately it transferred to another address. So it means that bad randomness attackers are real. There are bots lurking for transaction of bad randomness addresses and monitoring the mempool in real time, waiting for a transaction to be broadcasted across the network. And when they see it, they even fight over it, like there was multiple bots trying to fight over the transaction, paying high. The fees were also going up and up and up, and finally someone won about it. If you want to read more about it, we published it in 2 blog posts a few months ago. Now let's go to our second exploitation, which is kind of similar, but it has another element. So you would see it's not really only related to private keys. Also, other elements of cryptographic protocol are vulnerable to bad randomness. And we'll talk about the ECDSA nonce. ECDSA signatures are used in many security-related protocols, authentication, and also cryptocurrency. For example, Bitcoin and Ethereum uses that. And this nonce an ECDSA has a nonce, it requires a nonce, and that nonce must be secret. So again, let's make it completely random, so even I cannot guess it, because if a nonce is somewhat predictable, it's well known, and in fact presented a few years ago in Black Hat, that even 1 bit of leakage from the nonce can be really dangerous for the whole protocol. And someone repeated the same experiment that we did. He reused a nonce over the Ethereum network, and again, his addresses were abused, and immediately, and money was immediately transferred right from his transaction, his account, to another attacker-controlled account. And there are also, like, there was another vulnerability in YubiKey that had same issues. It was not reported to be exploited, but they had to recall all of their YubiKeys back to the factory and reset everything. So, and now to completely different example. So if you were bored, you're not into cryptocurrency, you say it's a hoax, maybe you're right, I don't know. But now we'll talk about something we all use, and this is the TLS protocol. So we're starting something new, you can reconnect. Okay, so let's talk about the TLS malware. The reductor malware was identified by Kaspersky 5 years ago and attributed to the Torla APT group. This malware patches the random number generator and also injects certificate authority certificate, which allows enables the attacker to send the TLS encrypted and signed traffic, which is not actually from the actual website. So, but before we dive into the detail, let's remind ourselves of the basics of the TLS handshake, and we can see where randomness comes into play there. So the first message, this of course sent in plain text, because this is what you're doing. You're doing a handshake in order to coordinate a key between Alice and Bob, client and server. It must be sent in plain, and it contains the client random, which is represented by this lovely dice. And what happens if the PRNG is infected, is exploited, and it's not really random? It means that a fixed value will be sent in plain text, which allows the attacker to identify the victim traffic out of the general public traffic. And how the attackers did that? This is still taken from Kaspersky original blog, so they just patched 4 different functions in different DLLs. It depends on which browser the victim were using, so they just patched the PRNG with something that instead of randomness returns some known value that was calculated, it was specific for each user. And the result, if you look at it over the network, would be if we replace the random bytes, let's say by all zeros, it's visible over the network. So let's do some cyber paleontology, as Kostin Rayo from Kaspersky would say. And with, paleontology, you take a bone from a dinosaur, some teeth, and say, okay, this dinosaur was that big and was doing like that, and it was a grass eater or carnivore or so on. So we know that the reductor malware patches the PRNG and injects certificate authority cert. So what is it doing? So it must be related to a server monster in the middle, what we used to call man in the middle. Now it's monster in the middle. And let's see how we think, how Kaspersky thought it works. So the attacker infects their victims, but also has some presence over the ISP or somewhere upstream to the internet. And so when they see a benign user not infected, the client random is indeed random, they just let it pass and get a normal response out of the server. But when they see the victim sending a message, and they know this is the victim because the random is something that the attacker expects, then the monster in the middle can fiddle with the response and send something they sign in the name of the attacked website, and the client will trust that because the malware also knows to inject certificate authority certificates, and everything works perfectly. So up until now, we just presented the original Kaspersky research, and there are some observations we need to take out of it. So monsters, bad randomness attackers, are real. Okay, some APT actually did it. They played with the PRNG for their own causes. And although some would say, okay, if we hadn't had this case, someone might have said this is theoretic, because although attackers can get everything, they're already presented on the victim's machine. They can take the traffic from there, they can fiddle with the response from there, but they prefer to fiddle with network traffic. So why do they do that? So, and the first answer, it does not really matter. The most important thing is it does happen, attackers have their own reasons for doing that. Therefore, this is a valid attack scenario. We should be worried about having a malware on the victim side and having a tandem monster in the middle malware on the ISP. But if we want to resonate about it a little bit, we can say that this is a very much more stealthy mode of operation obviously if you do it at scale. So instead of doing all the dirty work on the client side and fiddling with traffic and exfiltrating data out of it, you can just do as minimal work as needed on the client, where it is exposed to antivirus, EDRs, and so on and so forth, and do all the dirty work on the server where you are most, it's much more sheltered environment from the attacker's perspective. So we can conclude that this is a very important, stealthiness is important for TORLA attackers. And now we move on to our new findings on this old case. So what we presented before was the classical TLS handshake. But there were improvements to it. The TLS handshake with EDH, ephemeral Diffie-Hellman. And in this case, there are another parameter that needs to be random, and this is the client Diffie-Hellman parameter. And why do we use Diffie-Hellman to begin with? So the point of ephemeral Diffie-Hellman was to provide perfect fault secrecy to TLS, because prior to Diffie-Hellman, the attacker could, which is an eavesdropper, can eavesdrop to the encrypted traffic and just store it, hoard it on the side for years. They cannot read it, but they can store it. And hopefully, for the attacker perspective, one day they will be able to compromise the server, take the private key from the certificate, and read all your past communication with this server. And with Diffie-Hellman, the client also participate in creating that key. And it's also ephemeral, like it's not stored in any place. So because of that process, this eliminates that attack vector, because if you store that EDH encrypted traffic with TLS, it's useless afterward, even if you compromise the server certificate. And how does Diffie-Hellman achieves that? So if you look at the right-hand side, at least for me, also to you, it's right-hand side, you can see Alice and Bob, and let's do some color analogy. So there is one common color. Everybody knows it. This is yellow. But Alice and Bob picks a color at random. Let's say Alice picked red, and Bob selected at random blue. And then they are mixing it, privately they're mixing it. And the security of this protocol is because mixing is a one-way function. It's easy to mix two colors together, but it's very hard to separate them. So then both Alice sent to Bob their mixed, the color mixture, the orange, and Bob sent the green color mixture. And then each of them adds to it a mix again, the private color again, the secret color again. So they both get a mixture of yellow, red, and blue, finally, which creates a brown. But an eavesdropper that listens to this traffic, he knows, it sees the yellow, it sees green, it sees orange, but it cannot combine them together to get the brown. But obviously, if Alice color, the client color red, it becomes known to the attacker, maybe they choose red for Alice, then it's become trivial to get the resulting brown color, because the attacker knows that Alice selected red, and it sees over the wire that Bob public, the mixture is green, and the attacker can do the same as Alice and get the common secret together. And this is exactly the attack, and that's what we think Tola was doing. Because reductor attackers could probably passively eavesdrop, because as you can see, even if they didn't mean it, and I think they meant it, but even if they didn't mean it, because they were patching the random number generator for the client random, it also affects the client DH parameter, and the client DH parameter is also non-random and known to the attacker in the same manner that the client random was known to it. So how we think it actually, like in addition, of course, Tola attackers can be also active man in the middle, and that's why they had their CA the CA injection capability in the malware, but they can also passively eavesdrop. So again, in this setup, when a benign user sends their request, the monster in the middle just ignores that, yeah, and lets the request just flow. But when a victim sends the traffic, the monster in the middle knows it can see the results of it because it knows that if you have that random, then your private Diffie-Hellman parameter is something that is known to the attacker and can get readability to the requests and responses. So this is the demo time. And I include the recipe. You can look at it up afterwards, but let's switch to the demo itself. So in order to simulate, I hope you can see. If not, I will also describe what's going on. So in order to simulate a client, a vulnerable client, we took a Python script that implements Diffie-Hellman. Is it playing? I don't know. Is it playing? Maybe we should. I don't know. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. Okay. It's playing. And instead of creating client random at random, we just hard-coded all zeros to it. Okay. So what you should have seen here is we had built in, we hard-coded the random numbers and also the private Diffie-Hellman key, and we created that vulnerable client for Diffie-Hellman key exchange. And then we created another tool. All of them are free and open source and included in this presentation that actually decrypts the traffic and given just the public data and the knowledge of that private key. So if the demo would actually work, that was the place that you would clap, but let's go on. So thank you. Thank you, guys. You're very gracious. Thank you. And so what are the additional observations out of this process? So bad randomness is so undetectable that we're not even sure what the attackers have done. Like 5 years has passed, and this discovery slipped the eyes of Kaspersky, but we cannot even do, I cannot think about evidence that will positively show us, except if we would sometime catch that server component of this attack, and or someone from that APT group said, okay, this is what we done. So it's very, very stealthy attack. And attackers are even more stealthy now because passiveness is the ultimate stealth mode. And another general lesson from that in cryptography and security as a whole, that it's hard to talk about what is more secure than others because, like say, okay, PFS, perfect future secrecy, is great, right? Because it, for some attack model of attacker holding our traffic for a lot of time, it helps. But on the other hand, for this attack model where the attacker can play with the random number generator and has some master in the middle setup, which is real, as we had shown, like for this, it reduces the secrecy because attacker can now passively decrypt that without needing to compromise the original server. So it's interesting to say like that security is multidimensional. So when you add in one place, maybe you create new vulnerabilities in another place. So let's talk about solutions. And let's start with solution that doesn't work. Bad solution. So maybe when you thought about it, okay, you said, I cannot trust anyone. I cannot even trust my random number generator. I will create my own randomness on my own. And like inspired by this XKCD, I can create a passphrase that will create enough entropy in it. And people actually did it. It was called brain wallets, and entropy was generated from passphrase. And over a decade ago, Ryan Castellucci showed on DEF CON that he can probably guess many of that. And he found more than 700 Bitcoin. So in today's value or yesterday's value, and at the start of the month's value, it was like $50 million. So Ryan could have been a very rich man if he wasn't so obsessed with ethics and stuff. But For example, Down the Rabbit Hole held about 80 Bitcoin in July, so it's like $5 million in today's value. So as the Bitcoin Wiki concludes, humans are not a good source of entropy. So although we want to reduce our dependency in a random number generator, we still need them. We cannot be our own random number generators, okay? What actually works is if we reuse existing good randomness. So more of, let's say, sustainability. Let's not overuse that scarce resource of randomness, because each time we use randomness, we give another opportunity for the attackers to attack us. So, for example, instead of randomizing the nonces that we saw for ECDSA, we can just deterministically derive them from the entropy of the private key and the message. So this is secure and used in many wallets. Same trick can also be applied to some TLS communication also. It's called the nonces trick, and instead of the server creating randomness, again, directly from the random number generator, it takes it from its private key, again, with the one-way function, some sort of a HMAC, and another parameter, so we don't ask the random number generator for more and more randomness, but reuse the existing randomness. So this works. And additionally, obviously, we need to protect the random number generator itself. It's as important as protecting the secret, because that actually generates the secret. So one way is to just dig deeper. You know, if you store your private key in secure hardware, then your random number generator is part of that secure number. But this is limited because, let's say, you want even more security. How do you get it? You cannot get any more hardware into it. And the way to scale it is it's kind of like in AWS. You need, or sorry, in cloud services, like it's better to scale horizontally because you can add more and more machines instead of scale vertically and you building bigger machine, because this is limited. So if we distribute the random number generation, then we can easily scale it, because the motivation behind it is if you add up a lot of numbers and one of them is random, then the whole sum is random in itself, right? So one honest party can save even if all the other parties are corrupted. So let's do it distributively. It needs to be in a non-naive manner, so it requires multi-party computation. And this project, for example, DRAND, distributed RAND, is doing just that. So again, and it's very much easier to scale that, because if you're worried, okay, someone could infect all of the parties, like I'm using two parties. Two parties is not enough. Attacker can, in parallel, infect the first party and the second party. Okay, I can add a third, a fourth, and so on and so forth. So I hope you're convinced that this is easily scalable. And this is exactly what we're doing in our Zengo wallet, and others are doing in MPC computation for ECDSA. So with MPC, the key generation is distributed. So bad randomness of a single party will still create a random key, because the non-corrupt party, the healthy party, save the corrupted party. And also signing is distributed, because we have randomness in signing also. If you remember the nonce that is used to ECDSA sign. So again, the randomness of it comes from two parties as part of the protocol. And our implementation for it, by the way, is open source, and you can just use it, and we documented it in many other blogs. So to sum up, MPC wallets had no single point of failure. The key generation is distributed, so even if malware is present in one of the parties that actually generated the key, still the other, it doesn't have a hold over the other party, because they are very different operating system, and so on and so forth. But not only protection against malware, but also protection also against bad randomness. Again, this is because of the secure design of the system. Like security architecture is very important because we didn't have in mind the problem of bad randomness. We didn't think about it. But because you create a very secure architecture of this, that is doing key generation and the signing in distributed manner, it also helps in the randomness because, again, the randomness in itself is also distributed. Okay, and even if one party is compromised or its random number is getting compromised, still the other party is enough to save it. Okay, so just to sum up, bad randomness is indeed crypto's perfect crime because A, it's lethal, and B, it's undetectable. It's actually being exploited in the wild. We show an example of APT attacks on TLS that uses bad randomness, Bitcoin dark forest attackers, Ethereum dark forest attackers. There are also other, we mentioned, honorable mention for YubiKey authentication vulnerability due to bad randomness. And the solution we suggest is protect your PRNG, remove unnecessary randomness requirement. Not everything needs to be randomized from the beginning. You can just derive it from randomized values you had in the past, and use multi-party computation and distributed computing to avoid single point of failure. And last but not least, always make sure that your video is working before the talk. So I conclude with that, and if there are questions, I will be happy to take them. If someone wants to ask, take the microphone. Thank you.
Hi, I have a question.
Okay.
My name is Arun. I am from Intel. I saw in your talk, you talk about PRNG, which is the pseudo random number generator. Have you, or in any of this work that you talked about today, has any TRNG or a true random number or a DRNG or has been used in any of this work? And the random number generators that you talk about in your second part of the question, right? So the random number generators that you talk about, have they passed the NIST randomness test suite?
So this is a great question, and also let's assume like the random generator is actually good, okay? Like provide value, but the attackers maybe can slip, like they take, like you have a good random number generator, NIST approved, it's a true random number generator, it takes it from Lava Labs that, from that, the entropy from there, nothing wrong with that. But then the attacker, instead of giving you like the output of that random number generator, just plugs in their value, okay? So just bypassing it in itself. So you are right, like there are certain type of problems that arise from defunct random number generator. And so if you protect against it, it's also good. But like the hardest part is to protect against maliciously random number generator. Like you had the NIST random number generator, and someone just plugs in something else instead. So thank you, very good question.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. If you want to talk to me, I'm here, and also you have my Twitter handle. So thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the talk.